Today's episode of Europa Universalis 5 will feature a playthrough as Castile starting in the year 1390, and in this video you'll see how to effectively conquer the Kingdom of Aragon without triggering an Italian-French coalition against you. You'll also find out whether something like the Iberian wedding actually exists, how to turn Fez, one of the poorer markets, into a much wealthier one that will be far more important to me than, for example, the one in Seville. And you'll also see how I took control over other markets. Greetings imperialists, Lucas here, and I have a Black Friday promotion for you. On the website of this channel's partner, besides the standard discounts on games, you can get up to 21% cashback. It's worth checking out, links in the description. And let me also remind you about the giveaway. The results are in less than a week, with this monitor to be won. More information in the description. Yes, my Castile is doing quite well, although I really have made a few mistakes. Because in fact, I could have started my conquest by dismantling Aragon, but I don't know, somehow Portugal seemed like a more important target at the beginning. I'm counting on it having better reach toward the Niani markets, meaning those in Mali. However, I still have a very strong economy, and from now on it will only grow. And thanks to population relocation, my levies are also getting stronger. And since we're talking about migration, I misled you. I'm sorry. I often said that I was expelling the population from those northern provinces and moving them south. And unfortunately, that's not true. That's not how this mechanic works. Migration is a mechanic that occurs only within a single market. So it could work if I removed the northern market in Burgos, but the moment I have two separate markets, it won't work that way. Our heir to the throne, King Pedro, is also problematic. As you know, he is insane, and you often ask me how he can die. Honestly, the best way is to assign him as a military commander and maybe he will die in some battle. Alternatively, let him lead the army during an invasion of Morocco. There's always an increased chance that during naval transport he'll catch some disease or die of malaria. Yes, I didn't think of that, but the fact that he'll take a few thousand souls with him, well, that's another matter entirely. But everything for the good of our country. My first step in making Fez a richer region, one that will finally bring me profit instead of being only a vassal maintenance cost, is to integrate my vassal Fez as quickly as possible. Because honestly, this market is currently very poor, and when you look at its trade advantage and trade capacity, it looks really bad. This is what it looks like, for example, for my Seville. That's why I don't even want to use this option on my vassal, because it takes away 50% of its trade capacity and trade advantage, and for Fez it's just not worth it, it's too weak. However, Fez has a lot of very populous provinces and already 3 cities. I'll be able to turn most of these locations into cities, which will massively increase the trade capacity of the entire market, and that's what I care about most. Only secondly do I care about some of the resources found here. There is a lot of iron, which will be needed in Castile around the year 1500, and a whole lot of beeswax. Seriously, beeswax stopped my entire trade in the year 1600. Fortunately, on patch 1.07 I can still trade sugar, but later it will be very unprofitable, because starting from the next patch, populations will have increased demand for goods naturally found in their markets. Oh well, we must take advantage while we can. Fez and the surrounding areas are also very important for one more reason. There are several natural harbors here, which will allow me to quickly spread my control deep into Morocco, meaning I will be able to make use of these locations. When it comes to succession, our Pedro is 55 years old, and I think he'll live to a maximum of 65. Maybe he'll die earlier. But then his son Juan will ascend to the throne, and he's truly epic. I made sure he has a good wife, so keep your fingers crossed that his children turn out great, or at least that he gets a son. But I have to admit one thing about King Pedro: he must have some really strong genes, because this is already the second genius he has fathered. Well, or maybe we owe it to his wife. And one more thing, in the newest patch, Paradox added this bar responsible for food supplies. By default, the bar is turned off, but you need to enable food purchases, otherwise your cities will start dying out. Well, or at least all the provinces that have a total negative food production. I will appoint Juan as my advisor as soon as possible, it's worth having him. Because every royal family advisor positively affects crown power. And it's also worth appointing family members as commanders, both of the fleet and of the armies, because that also increases crown power. And thank you to everyone who keeps reminding me about this cabinet action, I really forget about it. Namely, we need to appoint a head of the cabinet. The head of the cabinet gives very nice bonuses to the estate he comes from. Since he comes from the crown estate, he increases crown power. And look, after these 3 simple steps, my crown power increased by 10%. Yes, I am an idiot. But now you know these too, and I hope you will remember. As I said, I began annexing Fez and started preparing for war with the Kingdom of Aragon, so I'm building a spy network on that country. I also think that toward the end of this video, I'll be testing a few good locations for the Castilian capital, because maybe Seville will turn out better than Cordoba. Before that, however, I need to integrate my two other vassals in this region, the ones I got from Portugal. Although I have mixed feelings here, how do you do it? Do you leave Portugal to colonize? Or do you prefer to gain access to the entire coastline as quickly as possible, so you can build cities, which means more sailors and an even stronger fleet, and there are quite a lot of valuable resources here as well. I'm also continuing the specialization of Cordoba. What I mean is that I aim to get each building I'm upgrading to level 13 as soon as possible, instead of just adding +1 and so on. Specialization increases production efficiency, and that directly affects how much money I earn. Also in Cordoba, as well as in other cities, it's worth specializing all production buildings that consume the resource naturally found in that location, because that increases production efficiency by 10%. At the moment, Cordoba also has very good market access, even though the center of trade is in Seville, and that's because for market access, distance is calculated in the opposite direction compared to proximity. Meaning, in this case, from Cordoba to Seville. Yes, you usually want your trade center downstream, not upstream like you want your capital. A small difference. A downstream river flow provides +50% to that range. But still, I may test a few more things here. During this playthrough, I also made another big mistake regarding the vassals I created here. You can see it immediately when I use the integration map mode and start switching through each of my vassals. Look, all those red territories are ones my vassals haven't integrated yet. The yellow ones can't be helped, that's due to cultural differences, but basically most of my vassals have nothing but red provinces. The mistake is that until my vassals integrate those territories and turn them green, I should not force them to convert religion or change culture. Because just like me, they only have 2 advisors and can only perform 2 actions at a time. So they will either be converting culture or integrating a province. And yes, I also noticed that some of my vassals reverted to their original cultures, the ones they had before I forced them to change, which made them disloyal afterwards. So now I unfortunately have to change their culture again, but now I'm wiser, and I'll wait until all their territories are integrated. The ones that are shaded, because I should explain this, mean that the advisors are currently working on integrating those areas. And that's the advantage of historical vassals. That vassal will have its native, already integrated territories, and you can immediately change their culture or religion. It's also worth checking before annexing a vassal whether all of its territories are green or not. If they're not and the vassal doesn't change them to green, you will have to do it through cabinet actions. And I think that was the last of my mistakes. For the war with the Kingdom of Aragon, I will also need a regular army, so I'm now recruiting cavalry. For now, still no more than 6 regiments. And let our brave king command the cavalry. Unfortunately, I no longer have any other family members I could assign to the army, so I'm merging it into one force. Otherwise, I would literally split each unit into its own stack and assign a separate military commander to each one, because that would give me even more crown power. I will also expand my fleet with special Iberian caravels. These ships have increased naval presence and they work great for boosting it. I think I'll never conquer Aragon. I've been called into another round of wars against England. And after this war, I have a truce with Aragon until 1401. Unfortunately, I'm also embracing the Renaissance because it has already spread enough and it will always speed up my research. And I also gained a new law in the bureaucracy category. Here, I'm definitely going for centralization and faster road construction. That will come in handy. Since France left my war against Aragon, they can at least give me that 1,500 gold. As for further economic development, at the moment I'm still fully focused on expanding my RGOs. Though I don't get much profit from them yet, I also don't want them all being constructed in one place at the same time, creating a huge worker deficit there. That's why I always use this filter, and while holding shift, queue up more RGOs. I do this because the peasantry is what I can tax the most. And at this point, they give me the most money. And you can clearly see that this strategy works. If a peasant isn't employed in an RGO, then unfortunately they won't bring us any income. From what I know, those at the very bottom bring no tax revenue at all, they only produce a small amount of food. I'm also starting to improve relations with Italian states, mainly those with coastal cities, Florence, the Papal State, Naples. Genoa is probably the first step I should take. This is also the moment when I'll slowly begin exploration of more seas, naturally toward Mali. I must admit, a very good event has just appeared, giving me a very unique royal law. I didn't get it in my previous run, but it increases my silver, gold and mercury production and will increase my future income from colonial nations by 25%. I wonder if this isn't tied to the gold mine I've just developed to its maximum level. I'm curious how this will work out. The estates will get a bit angry, but I'm ready for that. Just as I'm ready for the death of this monarch, but he just refuses to die. In the meantime, I've prepared a casus belli against the Kingdom of Aragon, essentially for that single province. Honestly, I'll use this casus belli for something else, but you'll see that in the outcome of the war. Of course, my king will lead the army, preferably from the front lines. I also caught Aragon's army, literally their entire army. And right at the start of the battle, they're missing one flank. This will give me an excellent victory, because when your troops arrive on the line faster and attack, they inflict huge casualties on the enemy, and then the formations break, and my cavalry should inflict much greater losses. Even if these numbers don't show it, or maybe they do. Just before the end of this extremely easy war, I call France into it so that we share a truce period, and they don't attack Aragon without me. And my entire plan is that from Aragon, you can release two incredibly powerful vassals. Meaning there are two countries here that have core claims on these locations. Therefore, my goal in this war is to take the cheapest territory that belongs to those two vassal candidates. Preferably entire areas. A bonus for me will be acquiring Sardinia as my own possession. And then, at the end, war reparations and money. And that's all, this time. Right after the war, I create the two historical vassals, and these will also become my fiefdoms. And why? I'll explain in a moment. Previously, I was creating a lot of vassals because I thought fiefdoms were worthless, but that is not true. The ruler of the fiefdom is our king. As far as I know, these vassals should not break free after the death of my ruler. I even asked on the Paradox Discord. But what's nice is that each of these countries will have its own parliament. And remember, in parliament there is a decision that increases ruler skills. There's a chance they'll choose it, which will improve the stats of my future rulers, which is why it's worth having several fiefdoms under your king. Besides, the liberty desire of each type of vassal is calculated separately. And now look, when I switch to the integration map mode, I can see all the territorial claims of my vassal. And with this casus belli, I will conquer those areas for my vassals, which will give me much lower antagonism. Unfortunately, Paradox is a bit misleading here, because those claims will only appear after the truce expires. So at first you might think you have nothing. Finally, a new king, and such a young one too, I really like that. Unfortunately, now I need to find someone to take his place in the cabinet. Yes, his brother is already there, and at this point he becomes my prime minister. Right after the war with Aragon, Fez, just before I integrate it, managed to integrate almost all of its territories, except for these two. Well, I'll have to do that myself. Still, the integration progress of these locations is already very high, so it will go quickly. And in fact, the most valuable provinces are now my cores. I have a lot of accepted culture here. Great! My merchants have already appeared on the Fez market. And okay, my market access is small for now, but I'm still using 100% of the resources found here. I need to discover Mali as soon as possible. I can't believe I didn't do this earlier, but I hadn't built temples. Every temple is super important because it increases control by 5%. Who will win this battle? 300 knights or 1,500 peasants? Let's see. I predict a minor slaughter. How beautiful this looks. Although the losses were ultimately higher than I expected, but then the Andalusian revolt surrendered. Now I have a few more steps ahead of me. They won't be easy because they're very expensive. Namely, in every one of these locations where I already have towns built, I must turn them into cities. I mean exactly this whole region, and so that it forms a path towards Seville. I'll do the same thing in Fez. Everything along the way to Fez I will soon turn into towns and later into cities. I'm also funding several more expeditions. And here on the coast I am expanding the road network, making sure that from each of these natural ports it spreads further inland for now, because this will soon improve my proximity. If you're wondering why I have these characters pinned here, it's basically because whenever a daughter, son or anyone is born, I pin them here right away. These are the people I'll most likely have in my cabinet soon, so I make sure they receive the right type of education, not always the most expensive one. And I also want to know what stats these characters will have, and what life partners I choose for them. Though I don't always do this, because sometimes it's worth keeping a woman as an advisor instead of marrying her off. And the next step is catching up on the marketplaces in basically every single location in my country, because I can see that I've neglected this badly. And I'm already starting to use Fez. My further research, we now move to the Renaissance tab. an extra government reform, an additional cabinet slot. Here, in this section, I'm researching everything. Culture will be very useful as well as greater cultural influence, and I hope my ruler will live those 3 extra years. And then there's a really good chance I'll start catching up on naval technology because Castile needs it badly. And look, the truce expired, territorial claims for my vassals immediately appeared, so I act on them right away, although from what I can see, it's only for one of them. Interesting. But here, I'll want to capture the capital as soon as possible because it cost the most war score. Aragon allied with Tunis. What traitors! Wow, that Tunis actually has an army. We'll need to attack soon, but first I'll take the territories from Aragon, whose army I caught near Barcelona, and this will be a standard battle where I have a quality advantage, but more importantly, a numerical one. Ho ho ho, Castile has already become a great power. What I like is that Tunis just lost a battle to me, then retreated onto my forts, but they have no food, so that army will soon cease to exist. Alright, and now I take all these territories here for my vassal, and it doesn't matter whether you take them for yourself or transfer the occupations to the vassal. It costs the same war score and the same antagonism, I tested it moments ago. And even taking such a large amount of territory, which in my previous run caused a coalition that even included France when I conquered this much without these casus belli, this time only a handful of duchies are upset. And France doesn't even cross 50 points. I've built several more cities, now I'm securing the sluices, securing the temples, everything that increases my control. And basically, first of all, I'm expanding markets everywhere here. Yes, it will take some time before we have enough burghers. I'm doing very similar things in Fez. I'm already building cities along the coast. And this is the most important part because here I will have the greatest proximity, basically the entire coast. So if I build anything more, it will be in these locations. Aside from cotton, there aren't any particularly important goods for me here. After building more cities, I'm building more marketplaces. But in Fez, I also need to watch food, because it's at negative 120. This means I need to start building fields somewhere to supply food to this province, so it doesn't buy food from the market. Luckily, there's a location here that I'll develop for food bonuses. I just need the money. And it's right next to a river, so I'll also be able to build irrigation and farms here. All of these will increase my efficiency. Usually, if you have one such location, it's enough food for the entire province. Yes, I got it! I discovered the Mali market. Great! Now I need to uncover this whole coastline. It will cost some money, but I want to do it as soon as possible. And no, I don't intend to colonize this area, not this time. I won't repeat that mistake. And basically, during the 6th war, France won the 100 Years' War. And even better, they gave me 2 provinces, which is nice of them, as well as 2,500 gold, part of which I will spend to establish my trade offices in other European countries. Actually, I spent everything. And let me tell you, it's worth reviewing the heirs your heir has, because now I'm looking and I can't believe it. 3 times an idiot. So I have no choice. As Castile, I must change the succession law to the one that is frankly the best anyway, the one where I can choose one heir from among several. Unfortunately, this only applies to male heirs then, but still, I think it's worth doing. Unless there's a better law, then let me know. But in this line we have another genius, so it's genius, 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 which I really like, and I even have a third genius. Of course, this means certain political turmoil for my Castile, but I'm ready for it. I think. In fact, for a few years, I won't spare any expenses in order to raise stability and legitimacy as quickly as possible. And it's good that I changed the succession laws because I immediately have a new king, and for now, the heir is yet another genius. Who would have expected that? And I'm beginning my final stage of wars with Aragon. I'm not calling France as an ally, and I'm not even raising my armies because my vassals will likely handle it. What I am doing, however, is starting the colonization of the Canary Islands. Since the process of colonization has moved closer, I now need to take care of everything that's basically here. For Castile, this part of technology is important, but only at the right moment. And now I check again, yes, I can literally designate my heir, although this isn't necessary right now because the heir I want will be chosen anyway. But if I wanted to secure it, there you go, there's a way. After conquering Aragon and its last remaining provinces, no dangerous coalition will form against me. Only the French duchies are able to join, and none of the Italian duchies, maybe except this one, will join the coalition. Most of Italy doesn't care that I conquered Aragon, so I hope that the method I just showed you for conquering this country is pretty solid, especially since I'm not even sure if we can get the union. And yes, I'm restoring Aragon back again, because honestly, I don't have the time to integrate all these territories myself as personal domains. With time, of course, this country will be integrated. And in fact, these 3 vassals will be useful to improve my stance toward Catalan culture so that it becomes more accepted. After a moment, my situation finally stabilized, and I even got into the positive in the meantime. Look how my trade income has grown. Fez already brings me 61 gold income, Burgos 78 and Seville 123, of which I hold almost 50%. Now I'm facing another massive expansion of RGOS, where I literally shift-click everything so it all gets built. It's absolutely worth it. And even if my earnings are minimal due to low control, these locations still produce resources that I can export or others can import. And it's still more than zero compared to if that population remained unutilized. By the way, I just confirmed that the Iberian wedding does occur. In this case, it turned out a bit strange. Sancho seems to have quite a narcissistic attitude. Too bad that, even so, I am the ruler of this country and it gives me nothing now. After my recent expansions, the control in this area looks much better than before. It's also starting to look very good in the coastal locations. Of course, this translates into my income. And soon it will get even better, because I'm building docks everywhere. All of this will increase the port capacity in all of my coastal locations. In addition to docks, I'm also building harbor defenses. All of this will positively affect port capacity. I also got a couple of smaller unions, but I don't really care about them. And basically, I decided to annex my Portuguese vassals right after I saw what kind of control I have along the coastline. This means that Portugal will look very similar, and I think the same will apply to the far north. I'm also considering whether it's truly worth moving my capital to Seville because it receives 76% proximity. That's a lot. But as usual, I'll test this once I integrate those two vassals. I also want to start converting the religion in the new territories. Because yes, most of this territory is still Sunni. In Fezzan territory, I'll be building two types of buildings, monasteries and cathedrals. Both buildings give bonuses to conversion speed, and these will affect two stats. Both the automatic conversion that happens here and the one done by my advisors. I simply want to convert the population so that it becomes happier. Then the control will always increase by a few percent. Especially because after the culture change, most locations are already my full cores. And since I now have a solid economy that will grow from here on out, I need to prepare for the Age of Discovery, because it's just around the corner. And to prepare properly, I will need an army. An army that will conduct conquests in this direction and in this direction. Levies aren't suitable for this, they just die like flies. So wherever I have higher control, I'm building armories everywhere. There's no point in building them elsewhere, because manpower gain depends on control. It would just be throwing money away. And so the Age of Discovery begins. And honestly, for Castile, nothing is better here than the diplomatic approach. I receive everything I'll need for colonization, exploration, and of course trade. On the military side, there are a few very interesting upgrades. Especially combat speed, a very strong stat, and also adaptability, which reduces antagonism by 10%. Funny enough, the administrative approach seems the weakest here, although it also has gems like faster province integration. And as I said, I'm going with diplomacy. Unfortunately, France grabbed practically all the hegemonies except for the cultural one. Surprisingly, their base tax grows very quickly when they annex most of their powerful vassals. Though I'm actually not too far behind them in base tax. And great, the institution spawned in my country, though that's not necessarily good, because then it spreads much slower. And before my wars, I need to upgrade my professional cavalry. Let me tell you, this control is starting to look much better, so I even decided to invest in roads from my more distant natural ports. And I think this will help proximity spread nicely. I also researched better ships, so I'm modernizing my fleet. I'm getting rid of almost all my galleys, I don't need them anymore. Instead, I'll have Iberian caravels. Yes, an additional 30 ships. And I'll support these caravels with 5 or 6 heavy ships. I'm not sure if this has already been changed or will be changed in the next patch, but the fleet is supposed to work like this. When a mixed fleet enters battle, warships, whether galleys or heavies, will always engage first. Only then will trade ships and transports enter combat. This makes a lot of sense, because you can form protective cover for such fleets. Oh, and Castile has become the economic hegemon, and this causes me to receive several very useful things, which I will soon use in a very nefarious way. For example, I can force certain countries to transfer 50 of their trade advantage and capacity to me. It costs a bit of opinion, but it can allow me to take over truly wealthy trade regions where I don't own a single province, which gave me a really huge trade advantage as well as trade capacity. I have a few buildings here, but not many, and the money keeps flowing. I'll even force Austria to transfer trade to me. And what I just noticed, which is really cool, is that I can send my fleet to any of these markets to dominate them even further. I definitely need a bigger fleet. After a moment, I even took over the trade in Lübeck. The only thing I really have to watch out for is staying the economic hegemon, because all these trade transfers will stop working the moment I lose it. And basically, that's also my answer to whether I need this coastline sooner or later. I'm integrating Portugal because I will need to significantly expand my fleet. The consequence is that I'm rebuilding essentially every coastal location, at least in 2 cities. I'm leaving literally 2 locations in the south, which have really good resources and in large amounts. Alright, 3 locations, because I also need wax. Don't build towns and cities too early in the territory of vassals you are integrating, because you'll only increase your own costs. And I still have at least 20 more years of integrating both of them. So I'll leave the capital relocation for the next episode. And if you want to know why the location of your capital is such an important topic, I recommend this video where I explain everything like to a 5-year-old.